Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah ma ba'd. From the Masail in fiqh, which is a classical area of debate which has been going on for centuries and centuries, something that the salaf from the scholars have discussed, is touching the private parts. Does that nullify the wudu? Now there's two or three sort of scenarios. The first scenario is where it's skin to skin. And this is the view of the Hanabila. In actual fact, this is the view of the majority of the ulama, but the Hanabila have been very strict on it, where they have said if it is done skin to skin, then this nullifies the wudu, irrespective of whether there's desires or not. This is with the Hanabila. The majority talk about desires, we'll talk about that in a second, but the Hanabila said skin to skin, even if there's no desires, khalas. Now this is important, as we know, because you could touch your own private parts when washing, partners with one another, children, when you have to clean up their mess sometimes, etc. So with the Hanabila, they've said as long as it's skin to skin, irrespective of whether there's desire or not, it nullifies the wudu. The majority of the ulama have said skin to skin if there is desires. And we're going to talk about that and the details in a second. And the Hanafis have said that it never breaks the wudu and it's always mustahab, whether there's desires, whether it's skin to skin, whether it's behind a barrier or not. And this is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah. This is the view which is supported by Ibn Uthaymeen as well. And for me, it seems to be the strongest view as well. Inshallah, we're going to discuss this as we go along. So the first thing we have to understand, if it's skin to skin, this is the first point of contention. And the Hanabila have said it nullifies. The majority say yes, it nullifies as long as there is desires. What if it's behind a barrier? So say they're wearing clothes, blanket, nappy. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, وَلَا يَنْقُدْ اللَّمْسِ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حَائِلٍ وَإِنْ كَانَ لِشَهْوَةٍ. Even if there is desires, it doesn't break the wudu. This is because it is not considered as touching. If there is a barrier, it is not considered as touching. Another mas'ala which comes to the discussion here is that does it have to be with the palm? What if a person touches another person's private parts with another part of their body? Would that nullify the wudu? The majority of the ulama have said it has to be with the palm, with desires, or anything which is connected to desires, as in it could be another part of the body, but as long as it's done apparently with desires. Al-Awza'i said no, any touching. So I don't know if your elbow or something, I don't know, something ridiculous like that, but if it could be any part of the body. So this is another. So now we've discussed skin to skin, we've talked about behind a barrier, and we've talked about whether it has to be the palm or any part of the body. The majority said no, it has to be the palm or anything which is got the same sort of resemblance as the palm. I don't want to get too graphical, but I think you can probably understand if a person touches the private parts of another person with the palm, that could be likened to another part of the body, and then that would nullify the wudu. With the majority, they're saying if it comes with desires. What's the evidence for all of this? Right, we've got two or three main ahadith that the ulama have used. The first hadith is the hadith of Busra bint Safwan. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man massa dhakarahu falyatawadda." Anyone who touches his private parts, then he needs to perform wudu. So that's the first hadith, and that's what the ulama have looked at, and like we have said, some of them have taken this more literal and been more strict on it than others. But when we look at the remaining ahadith, we will see why there are differences of opinion and how some of the scholars have become more relaxed. We've got another hadith, this is from Abu Hurairah, that he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِذَا أَفْضَى أَحَدُكُمْ بِيَدِهِ إِلَى ذَكَرِهِ. If any one of you happens to touch his private parts with his hand, لَيْسَ دُونَهَا سِتْرٌ, and there is no barrier. So now this is now evidence to say that those people who say that even if you touch from on top of a barrier, which has been mentioned by some of the Shafi'i scholars and some of the Hanabila, لَيْسَ دُونَهَا سِتْرٌ, the Messenger of Allah is saying in this hadith, there is no barrier, so it is skin to skin, فَقَدْ وَجَبَ عَلَيْهِ الْوُضُوء. So the person has touched it skin to skin. Now this is the view of the Hanabila. Even if there's no desire, skin to skin nullifies. And the first hadith also, مَا مَسَّ ذَكَرَ فَلْيَتَوَدَّأْ. Anyone who touches private parts, then it nullifies. In this version of Abu Hurairah, now there's an extra wording which actually adds to the hukm and the fiqh and the masail. The Messenger of Allah said, ila, in the first narration, ila dhakari, in the second one, ila farjih, or ila farajih, or his private parts. Now with this, the majority of the ulama have said the front part takes the same ruling as the back part, or should I say the back part takes the same ruling as the front part. All of this is considered private parts. So with the Hanabila, if it's skin to skin, nullifies. With the majority, if it's skin to skin with desires, nullifies. If it's from behind a barrier with no desires, no nullification. From behind a barrier with desires, no nullification, according to the correct view. Then we've got the view of the Hanafis, and the Hanafis have said it is always mustahab. It is always mustahab. This is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah. And like I said, for me, this seems to be the more correct view. How do we know, or how did they come to that position? We have a hadith from Talq ibn Ali, radiallahu anhu, that he actually asks the Messenger of Allah. Now, this is why this, for me, seems to be the more stronger view, because it is that direct. He asks the Messenger of Allah, a man touches his private part in salat. Does he need to perform the wudu, Sahaba, outside of salah? So the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, La, no, you don't need to perform the wudu again. Innaha huwa bud'atun mink. No, it's just another part of your body, it's just another limb. So for me, this seems to be the stronger opinion, which is that, and this is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah and Uthaymin and others, that if the person has touched his private part, whether it's a barrier or from behind a barrier or skin to skin, if there's no desires involved, then there is no need to repeat whatsoever. The Hanafis have taken it to the as far as saying, even if there is desires, it's mustahab. But for me, what seems to be the middle ground in this, now this is important for us to understand, because like we said before, the issue here is a classical issue. This is an issue that the scholars have been discussing for ages, for centuries. So you are going to have students of knowledge, you are going to have scholars saying different things, and this is the reason why we've gone into the detail here, so that people can understand if they've had one view, then they can understand where the views are coming from. So just to summarize it all, the majority of the ulama have said as long as it's desired based, then the person needs to perform his wudu again. The Hanabila have said as long as it's skin to skin, whether it's desires or not, he needs to perform his wudu again. The Hanafis have said it's always just recommended. It doesn't nullify, because there isn't credible enough evidence for us to say that it nullifies according to the Hanafi view. For me, as you have seen, the three main hadith, the Messenger of Allah in the hadith of Busra, he clearly says if you touch your private parts, then you need to perform your wudu again. In the second hadith of Abu Hurairah, he says if a person touches his private parts and there is no barrier, then he needs to perform wudu again. But then in this hadith, the hadith of Talq ibn Ali, he says no, it's just a part of your body. So how then do we reconcile? The correct view in this, for me, and this is for me, like I've said, obviously there's scholarly difference, but for me, what seems to be more correct is that if the person touches his private parts or somebody else's private parts with desires, then it nullifies his wudu. And if they have accepted it, then it nullifies their wudu as well if there is desires. If there is no desires involved, then it is mustahab for them to repeat. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us fiqh of the religion and He teaches us ta'wil, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purifies our internal before our external. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على محمد.